In today's episode, we unpacked why nutrition is just as important as the actual training plan for big events such as marathons, half marathons, ultra distance events, and all Ironman events too. Whether you're seasoned or whether you're new to the space, if you're looking for some information about nutrition, whether it's in your training phase, on race day, or post-race, this episode is for you. Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Cool.
Look at us on a Sunday morning.
I know.
How good.
It's a little bit exciting. Mate, welcome back. You're the first return guest
You
of the
are.
podcast.
Yeah, how exciting.
What an honour.
Yeah, you must be doing something right.
We hope so.
The people have spoken. We've gotten you back on.
And mate, thank you for sparing some time on your Sunday. Like we said, after the Sharkies game last night, go the Sharks.
Up the Sharks.
Yeah, let's go.
You're not a Sharkies supporter?
I'm a Dragons fan.
Oh.
This is huge. Okay.
I'm a Dragons fan, but my wife is a Sharkies fan, and
Nice.
my mother-in-law is a Sharkies fan. So they're my second favourite team. And now, obviously, living in the Shire,
Fair.
kind of have to go for them.
Wait, are you not Shire born?
No, I grew up in Tamworth, actually, in the country.
Actually, I knew this. I knew this. Why did you choose St. George then?
My dad always went for the Dragons,
Yep.
and then I actually went to uni in Wollongong, so that was fitting. I lived in Wollongong for 10 years, so I went to a fair few home games down there.
Fair.
Just
That
stuck.
that was a coincidence that I was in Wollongong, but went for them from a young age.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mate, that's kind of like my origin story with the Sharkies because, I didn't know anything about NRL before moving to the Shire, and
you go.
now I'm a Sharkies supporter.
I'm
Even though we
not
went to a Melbourne
convinced.
Storm last night.
I'm not convinced you're a Sharkies supporter. For context,
I'm
last
trying.
night,
I'm trying.
Zeb in a crowd full of Sharkies supporters goes, "Go Storm!" I was like,
I just wanted to see what the reaction
Just
would be
ruffling
like from my
feathers.
fellow. Yeah,
You
from
got
my
some
fellow
looks.
Sharks.
You were shot some looks.
Just a couple. Mate, big weekend this weekend though. So they've got the UTA events on out in the Blue Mountains. You've been out there a fair bit over the last couple of years, haven't you, for those events?
Yeah, so last year or the year before, we did a nutrition study and actually got a paper written off the back of that with the University of Wollongong, which is really cool, which looked at diet quality in ultra-endurance runners. So that was a really cool, neat little study. And then previous to that, I actually went out there and did a very kind of raw nutrition intake study personally, where I was kind of following a few people around and tracking what they were taking in. That was probably in 2022, 2023. And really dove into the data on that based on people's personal preferences during a race, and also realized that with that database that I had probably about 50 different gels that I was like, oh, hang on, we can actually analyze what's in those gels and what's the difference between 20 grams of carbohydrates and one that has 45 grams. So I was like, it was a cool little study, and obviously just myself learning on the way as well. So it was good.
100%.
Do you love the data side of things?
I do like the numbers. It kind of makes sense to me, but also I would say in sport, I always say to clients around there's the art versus the science. We talk about the science, and then from the science you make the art of it to make it personalized for you, to go, oh, well, the data says 30, 60, 90 grams of carbohydrates, what works for you, your gut, your intensity, and things like that. So there's always wiggle room for personalizing things, but it's good to start with the science and then personalize it from there.
Yeah.
And had you heard any results from yesterday from people that you're kind of working with, or
Yeah.
any exciting numbers that you heard come out of yesterday?
Haven't really dove into the details yet. Most people kind of finished last night at
They're just like, I
yeah,
need to sleep.
yeah, probably half of them are still asleep, to be honest. But some good results. And at this point in time, I don't usually say it, but I haven't had a client DNF a race at this point in time. So,
Huge.
Ooh.
Huge. We love that. We love that.
yeah,
Okay.
so that's been 4 or 5 years of doing this, and I haven't had someone DNF. So
Unreal.
let's
Well,
keep it that way.
Yeah, we'll
Now
look
that I
forward to
say
hearing
that.
them wake up this
Yeah,
morning
I'll
then.
have to check my text messages
I know.
to make sure.
Chappo,
First
you'll never
message
believe what
after the
happened.
podcast. Oh, mate. Well, this kind of segues really nicely into, I suppose, what we're here to talk about today. Obviously, we kind of summarized a little bit about what we're going to discuss today in the intro, but looking into the wonderful world of nutrition, especially around running and some of those, or we're going to say some of those events in general. Yeah, some of those endurance sports. But something that I think a lot of people don't really understand a lot about, especially when starting out in a space like this, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. It's just a learning curve like anything else. And, if you're learning to run, learning what your body's capable of, nutrition's just a piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
and that's what it is. Sometimes people come to me and expect the world, and it is just a puzzle piece where you can slot that in and do really well with that. It's not going to completely fix your world. Training will always trump that. But having a really solid understanding of nutrition and feeding that into the way that you train is always going to be helpful. Both week to week nutrition, getting enough kind of nutrients in, and then fueling specifically for sessions as well. So there's kind of always two sides to that, and I speak always about wearing two different hats. Most of the time you're wearing your public health hat, you're eating nutrient dense foods, whole grain carbohydrates, things like that, and then you need your performance hat, which is the opposite of that. They don't often collide, and that's the things where we kind of can put clean eating to the side and we start to fuel for our sessions better. And sometimes that is a little bit more processed food and things like that. And I think for people to learn that, it's okay to take those in at times, because we don't need to be scared of things like carbohydrates or even simple carbohydrates at the right time and utilizing them in the right environment. We don't need to be scared of that, and it actually helps with performance.
Yeah, as you were saying off air, even like it's a lot of unlearning, like those beliefs around like what is and what isn't right around food. Yeah.
I think, especially female athletes have been told that they should be looking this way and they should be eating this like their whole life. There's a lot of social pressures there, and there's a lot of pressure in sport, and I'm hoping that a lot of that is getting dissolved now through conversations like this, where we can just be open and talk about, all athletes, but female athletes, that it's okay to eat more and to fuel properly for your sessions, and you'll probably be a better athlete because of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once you start like working with a client in a way, like how quickly does nutrition come into the conversation from the perspective of like some of those more performance nuanced things versus just getting like the basics and the foundations right?
Yeah, it depends on what their goals are and where we want to go with it. I would say the majority of the people I work with are probably focused on a specific endurance event. But it's all about building from the basics. It's that foundation, and it's that week to week nutrition, and kind of some things that people don't necessarily understand is, if we're underfueling slightly, if you're underfueling by say 300 calories a day, it might not be that noticeable. If your maintenance calories is 2,500 and you're at 2,200, you go, I just skipped a meal or I skipped a snack here or there throughout the day, not a big deal. But when you kind of accumulate that over the course of a week, you end up being kind of 2,000 calories down over the course of that whole week. So if that ends up being that week and then the next week and then the next week, you start to, in those sessions or your sleep or whatever, it's nuanced, it's very small, but you start to feel, you're not quite ticking the boxes, you're not getting through those sessions well enough. And so we need to start with the basics, and that week to week nutrition is the basics to keep our body functioning and us healthy and our immune system firing. And then we can start to talk about performance nutrition, because we can't dive there. We can't start that conversation there
until that foundation,
until we start to build up from there. So,
and as well, like training for these events, it's not like a 1 or 2 week job for most people anyway. I mean, there's some people that buy a ticket and they're like, I'm going to run a half marathon next week. Like, I really feel like that.
Yeah, it's a bold strategy. But,
but majority of people who are looking to set their sights on some of these events, they're planning this weeks in advance. So like they've got like a bit of a runway in terms of training plans and all that kind of stuff that they're starting to think about. And like you said, I think it's really important to identify the nutrition stuff early, because even before they start their running program or whatever they're looking to do, they already know which shoe they're going to get. They already know like all the logistics around the actual running and what the different training types look like. But a lot of the time, the nutrition is something I think that gets just taken for granted a lot of the time. They don't probably really understand, would you say, the extent that nutrition and eating proper like actually plays long term for their performance in
fully
events.
And to answer that, if you know what shoes you're going to be wearing on race day, you should know roughly your nutrition plan and carbohydrate loading strategy and what you're going to eat on race day morning. And be practicing that and go, okay, well, a bowl of oats doesn't work for me or does work for me. I'm going to continue to do that. And it's reducing the margin for error is what I kind of term it, where you know, you go, okay, well, the bowl of oats was good, but maybe the blueberries didn't sit too well, so we take them out. So it's narrowing that margin for error. So rather than saying overall, my nutrition is out the window, you go, okay, well, where and why, and start to pick apart little nuanced parts of it and go, okay, well, this is now working for me. I'm going to implement that on race morning every single time. Maybe I can add a banana in there. Maybe I can add this. And you start to tweak things rather than going, oh, I've got to throw that out and
got to swap this for that.
Yeah, got to swap this for that, or my mate's eating this, so I have to eat that now. It's you need to personalize things, and the only way to do that is trial and error.
And for the love of God, don't try something new on race day.
Fully. Yeah.
I feel like everyone's been, I tried a new gel on the day, and just
some people can get away with it, but it's not advised.
I'll never forget my first half marathon. I stupidly had like a tub of yogurt the morning of,
nice.
like amongst other stuff. But I don't know why I just decided randomly to include yogurt. I did not feel well.
Yeah,
it was not good.
Yeah, that's a proper hybrid athlete to go. I'm gonna eat yogurt. And
yogurt mixed with pre-workout. I was like, this is not good.
Yeah. There you go. But you learn, right? You either win or you learn. I always say, and it's like those kind of things. You go, okay, well, that's in the bin. Let's find something else.
Yeah, and even just to sort of debunk, I guess, some of the myths around carbohydrates with this type of fueling. How would you, like, for anyone listening that maybe is sort of stuck in that mindset of like, I need to eat, you know, purely like as many unprocessed whole grain complex carbs as I can, how do you sort of, I guess, start that conversation when they actually would benefit from more simple carbs?
Yeah, some people that I work with it actually takes a lot of time and a lot of kind of months to unlearn things that they've been told their whole life.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That takes time. Behavior change takes time.
Yeah.
But the best kind of analogy that I have between complex and simple carbohydrates is like week to week, we really want those complex carbohydrates, and think of it as post in the mail, right? Our complex carbohydrates is our nan sending snail mail. It's got so much money in it. There's lots of benefits in it, right? It takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
And then when it gets here, there's, you know, so much money in it that you go, oh my God, there's so much benefit in this.
Thanks, Nan.
In this package. Thanks, Nan, for sending that. It took 2 weeks, but it's here now. So that's a complex carbohydrate. That's what we want week to week.
Yep.
But when our muscles are actually working, we want that the simple carbohydrate is the express post. It goes straight to our working muscles. So express post, there's no real added benefit in there. They're simple carbohydrates, and that's what our muscles need.
Yep.
It's in our gut and out of our gut in a short period of time. And so that's that express post.
Yep.
And so that's what we want when we're working out. So when we have very nutrient dense foods like our leafy greens, it sits in our gut for an extended period of time, which is a good thing for our health. But when we are working out, that's when we can get some gut irritability because it stays in the gut for quite an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And so that's why we lean towards more simple carbohydrates. So, you know, if you sit in that camp and you go, oh, I've never tried this, I've never tried that, it's fine. Like, let's try and open up those conversations. And, you know, if you can't stomach things before a session, maybe try half a banana or, you know, a few sips of an orange juice or something to try and start to fuel more for those more important sessions, whether it's longer or more intense. It's okay to be fasted for the odd session here or there that's not so intense, so you're just going for a casual run with friends like 5K or something, that's fine. But when we're going, okay, this is a key session in my week, I really want to perform, whether that's in the gym or a, you know, long run or interval work, they're the sessions you want to be fueling properly for.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like that general conversation in terms of people respond differently to some of those fuels as well, from the perspective of some people do experience like GIT upset and things like that when they're starting to layer these new processes in. What does that look like for a lot of people? I mean, obviously over time, I'm assuming as well, people just get used to it and their bodies adjust slightly in the training phase as well.
Yeah, again, it's trial and error because, you know, some of the higher end athletes are taking in, you know, 120 grams of carbohydrates or more in something like a Tour de France or a World Championship Ironman. They've spent years of their life honing that with a nutritionist or a dietitian on board. You know, we can't expect our gut to take on that much if we haven't prepared for that. So it's about doing those runs where you are taking that food on, those simple carbohydrates. But what I think a lot of people probably do wrong in that space is they might go on their long run and they might go for 20 Ks and they've taken fuel on board, and tick that box, but they don't do it at an intensity. And when you're at a higher intensity, your gut kind of plays funny games where it might not be as as switched on or cooperative at that point in time. So I would say practice at intensity as well, at the intensity that you plan on racing at. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a big thing around training your gut, and it takes weeks and weeks to do that.
If we're looking in the context of like long runs or the sort of race specific fueling, again, I understand it would be so individualized, but for anyone listening, is there like a bit of a general overview of how to get into that process of like training your gut?
Yeah, I would say that a key element is, or a guide is the 2 hour, half hour rule in terms of pre-run, having something, a larger meal or kind of that breakfast, 2 hours out roughly as a guide.
Yep.
And then something half an hour before you start. And that's more in that gel, Gatorade, banana space, whatever you can stomach. That will set you up for your run. And then a lot of people go off like a distance to take fuel in. And I've heard a lot of people go, oh, well, I take something in at the 7K mark and then 14Ks. The issue with that is that if this first 7Ks is flat and I'm feeling really good, you get it done in a certain amount of time, but then the next 7Ks might be hilly, you might be a bit drained. That's going to take you 10, 15 minutes longer. And then the next one is longer again. So you start to blow out your feeding windows. So what I always say is try and set up a separate alarm on your watch that will beep every kind of half an hour, 45 minutes. And then you're taking stuff in at that point in time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I never thought about that. And I'm just like thinking back to my half marathon. I was like, yeah, I'm going to take one at like 10Ks and 5Ks and 15Ks. And by the time I got to 15Ks, my pace was just like starting to really dwindle. I'm like, God, I need something. My legs are turning to jelly.
Yeah. And it's your past self looking after your current self and your current self looking after your future self, because you don't necessarily bonk or hit the wall until you do, and you're like, oh my God, here I am. And then whether you're sitting down and trying to eat everything under the sun, it's still going to take you that kind of 10 to 20 minutes if you're even able to get back up and go again. But that to me is a failed nutrition strategy, because you haven't fueled to a point and then you've actually hit the wall. And you need to rebuild from there. Whereas if you're taking something now, in half an hour, your self is going to think, half an hour ago, you.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. I've actually got fuel to keep going.
Exactly. And you can almost, like if you're dialed in enough, when you have a feed, you can almost feel it. You can feel that slight change where you're like, okay, I'm back on top here.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And even I think obviously with time, you get more accustomed to listening to those cues in your body. You can feel when you start to feel a bit woozy or drained.
Yeah. And you're never going to get it perfect. It's very hard. I always relate things back to surfing, where people will search for the perfect wave. When you're looking for a perfect race, it's very difficult, like especially if you're in that marathon space, to go, I had the perfect race, my pace was on time, my nutrition was on time. And that's why people keep coming back to the sport, right? It's like, if I just did this, I might have gone a little bit quicker. And so we're always searching for that perfect race, and that's a good thing. That keeps us challenged. But nutrition is a part of that, so we're never going to get it perfect. It's about trial and error and finding eventually what works for you, and what kind of works for your gut while you're at a certain intensity.
Yeah, and then I think as well, like, because there's such a big training window for a lot of these events, how much do you find, or how much do you tend to talk to some of your clients about like using those gels early on in their training plan or early on in their like training period versus later on when they're like Ks are obviously a lot higher, their runs are a lot further, like some of that stuff. Is it still kind of a bit of a premise of, even if you're doing a short tempo run, or even if you're doing, like a hill run or something along those lines, you're still looking to fuel mid session as well?
Yeah, and it comes back down again where we base it off the science, and the science says that carbohydrates are our primary fuel source for anything above kind of that 60-65% intensity, which if you're doing intervals, if you're going up hills, you will be above that 65% in terms of heart rate. We kind of run out of carbohydrates around that 60 to 90 minute mark. So as soon as we're in that half marathon territory, marathon, ultra marathon, we need to be fueling. And so if people are doing those races, what I say to them early on, 12 weeks out, is that go to your run store and grab gels, grab a number of them, see which one works, because there's different grams of carbohydrates. Most nowadays are quite good in terms of their size is almost relevant to a 30 grams of carbohydrates in a serving. But then there's the viscosity of it too, right? So some are quite watery, which is good. Some are quite, some almost like an oyster.
Yeah.
What are the other one? The chia pot, the chia ones.
So there's a lot on the market now. So it depends on what you're kind of keen on and what works for you.
And everyone's so different.
Fully.
Yeah.
So
Like some of my friends will love the ones that I'm like, I could not even stomach that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I was like
trial and error.
I wonder what mine. I've been having the Pure Sport ones. Have you seen them?
Yeah.
This is not a sponsored discussion. But I've been having the Pure Sport ones, and you're right, like the viscosity and just how it actually goes down and how it sits in your mouth after.
Yeah.
Like they're fantastic, but I've had some in the past where like you have a little nibble at it, you're like, I can't run anymore just because I can't breathe.
And some of them come down to mouthfeel as well. That you run really well off 2 of them, but then when you have your third, you're like, oh yeah, no.
It feels gross.
And if that's the case, you need to change a race strategy to go, okay, well, maybe I alternate them so that they're not as bad, or maybe I'm getting my calories in a liquid form or so. And that's when you start to speak to kind of the marathon or the ultra marathon space where you can start to diversify your food a little bit more. Yeah. And the reason that gels work is they're just in a convenient, simple carbohydrate package. Yeah. So that's why they work well. You can do real foods if that's your thing, things like dates, bananas, but it's the convenience of those things. It's very difficult unless you're on like a bike and can take a banana or something with you. Yeah. It can get tricky to take those things, especially if you're running.
Yeah. I don't know how many like runners like are quite new to the space that you've worked with in the past. Because again, like I'm picturing a lot of the time when people are working on race day nutrition strategies, they're probably quite seasoned, or they've been in the space for a little bit of time to know that there is a bit of importance to that. As the kilometers kind of go up across the weeks, obviously like we're having this discussion around, like I'm assuming you'd consume more gels based for if you're running a lot longer. How would you recommend to people just to even like take 1 or 2 out, like even before they really start to hit some of those longer runs, if they're just starting, just to test them out?
Yeah, for sure. There's always that trial and error stage, and it doesn't matter what you take out on your runs. It's like what works for you. And I think the longer that you're going on those races, if you're in that ultra marathon space or if you're doing multiple day events, then you really do need to start to diversify what you're taking in. Because if you're doing a multi-day event where you're going for 6 days or longer, if you're relying solely on simple carbohydrates through gels, your body is going to not be happy with that because there's no nutrients on board, because you are accumulating day on day. You might be ticking off your calorie density, but you go, okay, I've got enough in for that run, and that will serve you okay for day 1. Day 2, day 3, your body won't be too happy. You'll start to feel it, and that's where we need to support our immune system week in, week out. But also, if you're doing multi-stage days, you need more nutrients on board.
How does this we've kind of spoken a little bit about the training of like some of the key running events and stuff, but we were having a quick chat about this off air. How does this change in terms of some of those tri events or the Ironman events in terms of that kind of training? Because I mean, I've never done one before, never looked into it.
Not yet.
But no, oh gosh, that's bold. But like obviously the swim component of like the race as well, and like hitting transition points. I'm assuming that's when they get a lot of their nutrition is at those transition points, and then they stack themselves with snacks for said run and said ride as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you've almost got like 3 or 4 stages of like a nutrition plan, and you're obviously not, unless you're doing an open water swim of 10 Ks, you're not taking nutrition on board usually in a swim. No. And if you've never seen people take nutrition on board for a 10K open swim, it's very interesting looking thing. So YouTube that.
I actually will. I'm really intrigued.
I'm gonna actually look that up again.
It's liquid calories, very dense liquid calories in a very small bottle, and they actually do like 1 or 2 strokes of backstroke and just slam the whole thing.
That sounds horrendous.
It's not It's not pretty, but they're quite efficient at doing it. So.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, for an Ironman, you're not going to be doing that. So it's about fueling well for that breakfast, that 2 hours prior and half an hour prior to your event. Swim, get through your transition. That's usually when you can take something on board. And I would say transition's kind of similar to an ultra marathon event where there's a checkpoint or a transition where you're like, okay, I can take something on board while I'm still getting ready.
Yep.
And then bike is actually something you can take a lot of nutrition on board. Usually you've got pockets at the back. You can stack your bike with a thing called a bento box, which is storage unit on your bike. And because your top half isn't as mobile, and that your kind of abs aren't moving around as much, or your gut isn't moving around as much, you can kind of take a little bit more whole foods on board potentially.
About that.
Whereas for your back end of your run, you might switch more to that gel or the liquid calories.
Simple carbs.
Yeah, but it depends on how intense your race is. If you're looking to race under 10 hours for an Ironman, you're probably getting through those transitions quite quickly. If you're trying to get to the finish line of an Ironman, you probably want to use those transitions to get some fuel in, to reset, and then to get onto your bike or get onto the run. And you're probably going to be better off by doing that and taking a little bit more time.
Yeah, right. And I guess that brings us quite nicely into the scope of carb loading, because I do think it's quite misunderstood. Like, does carb loading ever go beyond just the big bowl of pasta the night before?
Yeah. I think that's what most people think of it as. And, they're not wrong.
Yeah.
But the research around it says 1 to 3 days prior, depending on your event. And I guess what I've learnt in my time of doing this is that if your event is a 10 kilometer, you can do a mini carb load and still feel really good in your race. When you start to get to that half marathon, you're probably doing a day, at least a solid day or a day and a bit. Marathon, ultra marathon, you want to be carb loading for 3 days out.
Yeah.
In terms of how that carbohydrate looks for 3 days, the closer we get to race day, the more simple we want those carbohydrates to be. We still want whole meals, so still keep your regular eating patterns. We just want to reduce the amount of nutrient density, so those veggies a little bit more, and also kind of fats and saturated fats. So the less of those we have, the better our guts are going to feel. Yeah. But if we go simple carbohydrates too far out, so 3 days out, it's what we were just speaking about before. Our body's not going to be too happy that we've just had simple carbohydrates like, Coke and lollies for 3 days straight. If you did that without a race, you're probably going to feel pretty average.
Yeah.
So 3 days out, we're probably looking at increasing the proportion of carbohydrates on our regular plate. So more rice, more pasta in those dishes, and more complex carbohydrates. So thinking about adding things like sweet potato or brown rice, that's completely fine. So you've still got that nutrient density there. Then that 2 days out, 1 day out, that's when we can kind of shift towards those simple carbohydrates and always having a snack on you and not being afraid of, a few lollies after dinner or a Coke with dinner and things like that, because however you get them in, you really want to plump up your glycogen stores. So the amount of carbs that you have readily available, because we know that they're going to deplete in 60 to 90 minutes from when we start the race.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful.
And then as well, I think just starting to talk a little bit more about some race day stuff. Like, what about all the little micronutrients and things like that as well? So looking at like your electrolytes and things like that. Obviously, with lots of training comes lots of sweat and lots of that kind of stuff as well. In the weeks leading into it, like what are you looking at in terms of hydration and all of that as well?
The easiest way to understand hydration, I think there's a lot of confusion about hydration and electrolytes online at the moment. Pretty much unless you're in hot, humid environments, have gastro, or training continuously, you don't need to be smashing electrolytes every single day, every day of the week.
Food has electrolytes.
And there is a lot of food that have electrolytes in it. So we don't need to be over-consuming that, especially if we're not training. It's a great tool to use, and people aren't wrong by saying magnesium is useful, sodium is useful, that they are useful in those events. The easiest way to understand hydration is WUT, so weight, urine, and thirst. If you're training and you've got scales at home, if you really want to dial in, you can go, okay, well, I'll stand on the scales at this point in time and I weigh, let's say, 75 kilos. I go out and do a long ride for 3 hours. I come back and I'm 74.8.
Yep.
So what you've probably lost is water weight. And so that's one indicator of how hydrated we are. But the most simple way to understand how hydrated we are is when we go to the bathroom, if we are peeing light straw color, we don't want completely clear. That's probably overhydrated. But that's the color that we want. And once we get there and we're kind of a couple of days out from race day and you've got light straw color pee when you go to the toilet, you're in a good space.
Yeah.
Sometimes in nutrition, more is not necessarily better.
Yeah, with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree that I think that some of the electrolyte supplements are very marketable at the moment.
I think it's an easy product to sell.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's in a powder form. It's you know, it's very cool. And I mean, there's always a nugget of truth in terms of what's been spoken, and you know, people are possibly underhydrating, but I think what people need to separate is the difference between water as hydration and electrolytes. And they are useful, but we need to be using them in certain scenarios. If we're sitting at a desk every single day and we are smashing electrolyte supplements and not really training, it's you know, your salt intake is probably over the top, considering that you're getting a lot of salt in your salty foods as well. So we need to be careful there, and I think it's kind of striking that balance between, am I training and sweating a lot? If that's the case, electrolytes are part of my plan. If I'm not, I probably don't. I can hydrate with water.
Yeah. And what about, how does that differ then on like a race day with like some of those ultra endurance events then?
Yeah, we definitely need to be taking electrolytes on board. They're super important. When we sweat, we still are sweating out majoritively water. So water's still a priority. But yeah, it's about trying to figure out what works for you and still getting those electrolytes in. I usually say that there's kind of 3 or 4 levers, and if you've ever worked in kind of machinery or like a backhoe or anything, that you have 3 or 4 levers in front of you. In terms of race nutrition, there's certain products where you can pull all 3 levers at the same time, and those 3 main levers are hydration, carbohydrates, and electrolytes. So there is a product that you can pull, which is like I'd say like a tailwind. You pull all 3 of those levers at the same time. You're getting hydration, you're getting carbohydrates, and you're getting electrolytes. Then, you know, if it's a bit of a warmer day, you know, you might need a little bit more hydration, a little bit more electrolytes on that day. You need to figure out what your plan is to go, okay, well, I want to pull those 2 without necessarily pulling more carbohydrates. That's going to have my gut kind of upset or overdone. So figuring out what products have what elements in them, and you can actually pull those levers at different times. That's the best way to understand what nutrition products are around endurance events, and knowing which levers to pull. The only other lever that I'd say in that space, without going into the detail, is caffeine as well.
And
I was going to ask about
that
caffeine.
was going to be my next question too, but this probably segues nice into it now. Is how do you see caffeine in the new, like the supplement space, or where does it fit in that performance space?
It's the most studied nutrition aid that we have. It's called a ergogenic aid, which is a legal performance enhancer. I think at some point caffeine was actually banned from a performance enhancement perspective. Someone fact check that. I'm pretty sure it was, but it's a legal performance enhancer. What caffeine does is it reduces our rate of perceived exertion, right? And so what that means is if there's 2 versions of you that is about to do a 5K time trial, one version of you is caffeinated, one is uncaffeinated. The caffeinated version of you is either going to probably finish 20, 30 seconds quicker, or they're going to finish at the same time but feel a lot better in themselves. So caffeine is a super useful tool in a nutrition space, but there's probably 2 or 3 steps before we get to caffeine. And we just spoke about it in terms of building that base, in terms of nutrient density throughout our week, getting enough carbohydrates on board, and then we can start to look at caffeine. And there's a few other supplements that are quite nuanced, but to be honest, I don't speak to them with too many clients because we haven't really ticked the first couple of steps first. But caffeine's definitely a product that's worth utilizing in race space, and you just feel a little bit better when you're in.
Do a lot of people struggle to onboard it as a part of their nutrition plan from the perspective of the GIT upset stuff?
Yes, it can be. There's always a sweet spot with carbs, with caffeine, to go, I've hit enough that I'm going to get a performance benefit out of it, but I haven't gone over the top where I'm super anxious before a race. I'm jittery. I've got GI issues where I'm on the toilet, 3 or 4 times before a race. So it's striking that balance. The science says 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
Mm-hmm.
So working out what that is, it ends up being a lot by the time you times out 6 times your body weight of milligrams of caffeine, and most coffees would be around 90 to 100 milligrams of caffeine in a coffee. So if you're upward of, if you do the maths on that, some people are upward of 450, 500 milligrams. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So if you're like, oh, well, I'll just listen to the science and I'll do that, you might get some issues off the back of that. So it's about bringing that down, and you'll still get performance benefits at a lower end. You don't need that buzz and that anxiety to actually get performance benefits from caffeine as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And then cycling the supplements, do you find that like a lot of time people will use it then as like a resource throughout a race in terms of they might cycle between caffeine based like gels and things like that?
Yeah.
And have a normal gel without caffeine and then have a caffeinated gel like later into the race?
Yeah, that's pretty good strategy to have, just so that when you're still loading on that caffeine, but you're also not overdoing it by having it every single gel that you take in.
Yep.
A really good strategy is kind of when you wake up and having that meal, that breakfast kind of meal, is to start that caffeine load at that point in time, because caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours.
Yep.
So there's not too many events where you're going above 6 hours unless you're in that ultra endurance space or that Ironman space. So in saying that, by having something, even, if you're a regular coffee drinker, having a coffee with your breakfast, if you can stomach that, and then possibly having a gel with caffeine either just before you start or there's the first gel after that. That way you're kind of topping it up, and you'll always be kind of on top of where you're at.
Yeah, right.
And I've got the stat on the caffeine ban. I chat GPT'd it. So handy. It actually pre 2004, caffeine was on the WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency's ban list above a certain threshold.
Yeah.
That wasn't that long ago.
What was the threshold, does it say?
It says if an athlete had more than 12 micrograms per milliliter of caffeine in their urine, it was considered a doping violation.
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
I don't even know what that translates in terms of milligrams of caffeine, but
neither do I. Yeah. But very interesting. And then since 2004, it was removed from the ban list, but placed on WADA's monitoring program.
Yeah.
This means they track its use to see if abuse or performance-enhancing trends develop, but athletes are currently allowed to consume it freely.
There you go.
Interesting.
So legal performance enhancer.
2004 was not that long ago.
Oh, was it?
I knew it. Yeah, I'm glad.
Hey, you're good with the facts,
I'm glad
aren't you? Gee whiz.
Encyclopedia.
You are good with that. That's so interesting.
It's interesting to know that it was banned at some point.
Yeah.
But if anyone's interested in kind of where that space lies, and it's probably more those semi-professional to professional athletes, there's something called the AIS Sports Supplement Framework, and it goes through Category A, Category B, C, and D. Category A is the things like magnesium, fluids, carbohydrates. There's has very good research behind it, is not banned, very useful for athletes. That's our Category A. And it goes all the way through to Category D, which is performance-enhancing drugs. So there's kind of the B and C is kind of that has some evidence.
Not enough.
Yeah, not quite enough to go. It's either giving good benefit or it's possibly tricky on time in terms of that anti-doping space.
Yeah.
So we kind of want to avoid anything that's on a Category D or Category C.
Yeah.
You can play around with things in Category B, but Category A is your big ticket items, your
gold standards.
Your gold standards that you want to be trying to tick off.
Yeah, nice.
Pause.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, one more check.
I could see you wigging out. I was like, what's he freaking out about?
Yeah, right, mate.
Just make sure.
So now we're sort of into the post-race, right? Like we've chatted about.
I would love to go post-race a little bit, and then I would love to touch on early signs and symptoms of underfueling in the everyday, just really quickly at the end. Because I think as well, it's good to note about it, just going back to what you're talking about, accumulative wise.
Yeah.
I think in people's first race, they might not notice the impact as much as then the later races. You were talking about before, some people are really good at just going back-to-back races and not having an issue with it, especially people who are new to the sport or new to running or new to that whole endurance kind of space. They get through their first race, they're addicted, they love it, and then the impacts start to kind of come out in the water later on.
Yeah, for sure.
Once they get like 2-3 races in, all of a sudden they're getting injuries, they're getting all that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, post race, let's do it.
Alrighty. So we've sort of covered, I guess. I'm going to start that again.
Nice.
As soon as it came out, I was like, nah, take that back.
Yeah,
I
we're
take
gonna
it back. I take
just
it
run
back.
it back.
Okay. So we've covered the lead up into a race. We've covered during the race. Now let's dive into that post race, because do you think that is just as beneficial as focusing on nutrition in those first 2 phases?
Yes, and it depends on what you've got coming up.
Yep.
You know, if you've got a sport where you've got multiple matches, like soccer or football, where you've got a round robin event, it's actually super important to make sure that recovery nutrition is on point, because you'll start to accumulate kind of bad habits and poorer performance if you're not doing that. So I would say it depends on what your next session is. And, if you've built up for 12 weeks to do a marathon, is recovery nutrition after that marathon the biggest thing? No.
Yeah.
You want to be enjoying that with friends. So, you don't need to be too over the top with recovery nutrition if you've just done your key race and you've got a bit of time off after that. And I would recommend a bit of time off to clear the head and go from there. But
sleep in.
Sleep in.
Like all the UTA athletes this morning.
yeah. Hopefully they're sleeping with a big pizza on their bed or something. But overall, recovery nutrition is super important. The kind of 4 things, there's 4 R's that you kind of want to tick off. It's refuel, rebuild, rehydrate, and rest. Mm-hmm. So they're the 4 R's of recovery nutrition. And the way that we do that, again, is the 4 things that we want to look out for is protein, carbohydrates, fluids, and electrolytes. Yep. So if we're doing those 4 things in the meals after that run, we're putting ourselves in a pretty good space. And again, this is where I go back to that 2-hour, half-hour rule. Yep. So pre-run, we're 2 hours out, having something more substantial. Half an hour out, we're having smaller bites or something that's going to fuel us well. We do that same thing post-session. Yep. So we go half an hour. Is there something that we have in our bag that's like an up and go or a milk or something that we can grab from the service station on the way home? That's that half an hour. And then 2 hours is like, okay, what's my next meal? That's going to be a breakfast with friends or dinner where we go. There's a lot more nutrient density in there. There's the carbohydrates, the protein, and we're hydrating well. One key indicator that a lot of people probably don't see, if on a Sunday long run, you go out and you don't potentially prioritize rehydration afterwards. Think about how often you're going to the bathroom. Might not go to the bathroom for 4 hours straight, and you won't realize that unless you're conscious of it. Yeah. And so it's being conscious of that, and I think the science says that we need to rehydrate at 150% of what we've lost. So again, it's just going back to that WUT of are we going to the bathroom and peeing almost clear, not fully clear, but that's a good indicator, and that's what I use on, say, a Sunday long run to go, I'm going to make a conscious effort to get back to that point at some point, kind of around lunch or just after.
Yeah, nice. Right.
Yep.
And is that half an hour post event or post run crucial? Because I'd feel like a lot of people go, I'll just wait till the next meal. Like, I'm not really hungry.
Yeah. People talk about like more from that gym space of an anabolic window, right? And it's kind of a thing, but it's not super necessary. And from a protein perspective, it's more important that we get protein in throughout our whole day, the protein distribution across the day. Yep. You see gym bros that are drinking protein shakes. Yeah. Like directly after a yeah.
Your tails, it shows.
I was gonna say something actually. But that kind of protein shake directly after the last bicep curl, like it's good. It's still beneficial, but it's more beneficial to have that protein distribution across the day to tick off your overall protein goals for the day. Yep. So yes, it is. And if you can get into that habit, it's a good habit to get into. To be that person with the snack in your bag, with the snack in the car, with going past the service station on the way home to pick up a high protein snack or a high carbohydrate snack just to nibble on as you get home. Because especially if you've got to drive after an event, you realize that you've been in the car for 2.5 hours and you're like, oh, hang on, I actually haven't eaten or drunk anything at all, and I'll probably feel pretty rubbish tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep.
Just as a massive side note, what's the the protein.
Rockaby.
No.
What do you think of it?
Oh, they're
I
so
do know them. I do
good.
know them. And
Is
there
that
was
how
a
you
big trend with
pronounce
them
it?
for a while.
I've been calling them rokebies. Is
Oh
it
man, I don't know.
rockaby?
I could be wrong.
They're
fact
unreal.
check.
All right. Yeah,
Just
ask
ChatGPT.
Siri. Yeah. Spell it out to me.
Yeah.
No, what's the protein versus weight? You know, the number that I'm thinking of per
grams per
gram
kilogram?
yeah.
1.6 to 2.2
Yeah, per kilogram.
per kilogram. Per day.
Dude, it's a hard number to hit.
Is
I don't
that
know how
for
people hit
athletes
it.
though?
So
Or like sporty people?
yeah,
That's
it
fair.
depends. It depends what we're looking at because there's different nutrient reference values. Some of those are minimum values that we should be ticking off, and I think the minimum value for people generally is about 1.2.
Yeah.
So if you're don't train all that often, you still should be getting about 1.2 grams per kilogram per day
Yep.
of protein. If you're in that athlete range or you're starting to train a little bit more, you should be up or above 1.6.
Mm-hmm.
When we start to go above 2.2 grams per kilogram, protein is the same as any other macronutrient where if we're over consuming it, it ends up just being stored as body fat anyway. So it depends on what our overall calorie density is. So I would say that as an endurance athlete, sitting around that 2 grams per kilogram is good, and then offsetting that with a more carbohydrate rich diet.
As well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember hearing the numbers though, and then actually doing the math and going,
Yeah.
that is a lot of.
Yeah, it's a
like
lot.
you don't
I'm trying
actually
to do the
picture
math
how
right
much
now.
protein it is, but it's a lot of
Yeah.
protein on
So
the.
I think most people that are listening, if you can just times your body weight by 2
Yeah.
and try and kind of work kind of backwards off
Backwards from
that.
Yeah.
And the best way to think about it is to say, okay, I've done the maths on that, and it's 150 grams per day.
Yep.
Then you go, I'm having 3 meals and 2 snacks per day. How do I break up 150 based off kind of 5 meals, 3 bigger meals, 2 smaller meals? Can
Yep.
I do that? And that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which means that, your chicken breast, your protein shake, are those things, they're usually around that 20 to 40 grams of protein.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's no upper limit of what you can take in for a meal. There's a lot of myths around that as well.
Yeah.
But you kind of do the maths on what does 150 grams look like, and then break that up across the day.
When you
Yeah.
break it down, it's pretty doable. Like I was just sort of doing
Yeah.
the quick maths. I was like, if you have a good hit of protein every meal, maybe like obviously a couple snacks and stuff,
Yep.
it's pretty easy.
Yeah, you just got to be conscious of it. But
Yeah.
it's I always say you're either informed or not informed. It's a binary thing, and if you don't know the numbers and then try and figure out if you're close to them, you sit on that uninformed stage. So it's about going, okay, well now I know that number. Can I get close to it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's not just a 24-hour snapshot either.
Yeah,
I think a
fully.
lot of people fall into that trap of like, oh no, I didn't do it this day, so now I'm doomed.
The whole idea that our body like resets at midnight or something. It's not. We're not.
It
Cinderella.
does, doesn't it?
Oh,
Nah.
that's what I said. That's what I was told.
I think as well, so like we kind of covered, and I suppose the goal of today was to give people a bit of insight into, pre-race, in-race, post-race,
Nice.
like a little bit of a general gist of like things that we can kind of look at in those different phases of a training plan. Now kind of looking cumulatively across multiple races, and I think this is, we were talking a little bit about how it's addicting, right? Like people love it.
Yeah.
They love it. They get into it. They buy their first pair of shoes. They run their first half marathon. They're like,
This is
I'm
me.
going for a
Yeah,
mara.
yeah. This
I'm
is
going
my
for
whole
a mara at the
personality.
end of this year, and in 5 weeks I'm going for a mara now.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing I think we wanted to touch on a little bit were early signs of red S, and not necessarily like we were talking about before the need for a diagnosis, but what are the early signs that we're underfueling, especially in those scenarios where we're training for multiple events across a year or a couple of years. Because I think, just recently talking with a few people, sometimes you don't realize it, like you said, in the moment or in the first event that you're training for, but cumulatively across time, all of a sudden, sometimes there are signs and symptoms that start to come through that
Yeah.
put us in the injury landscape as well.
Yeah, and I think, people get excited about races and there's plenty on the calendar. And it's very easy to overdo races in a calendar year. And it's something that I've learned over the last 10 or 15 years is that it's actually better off to pick a couple and do well in those rather than trying to do 10 things at once.
Yep.
And a lot of people are guilty of that, and that's fine. There's 2 ways of learning. You either learn, properly, or you know, you kind of research all that sort of stuff, or you learn the hard way, and that's also fine. I've learned the hard way when I was younger as well. So
it's all part of the journey a little bit as well. It goes hand in hand with sport to any capacity.
Fully, and that's where you understand what your body's capable of doing. And I find sometimes when you push your body too far, your body will tell you when to have a break, rather than you going, oh, okay, maybe I should back it off or have a rest day here or there. Your body will go, no, we're done. Here's a stress fracture. Here's a rolled ankle. Here's being underfueled. And I will pull you up because you're not doing it. And I would say a lot of that, for me, ends up being load management. What a lot of people talk about is they go, oh, well, I'm ticking off these runs, but they haven't told their personal trainer or, you know, who they're working with that they also play soccer on the weekend and they've got 2 kids and they're running around with them as well. Like, that's all load management and being on your feet, depending on what kind of job you do as well. So
the lifestyle factors rarely make it into the discussion of planning for events or anything.
And so anytime you're talking to a health professional, whether that's, you know, an exercise physiologist, a personal trainer, a nutritionist, dietitian, you need to talk about your overall weekly load. And running is part of that, but also casual sport and things like that, that also plays into it.
Parents with kids, I feel like, is often they like minimize almost the amount of activity they do. Like, oh, I don't have time for work. Because I'm like, yeah, but you're walking every single day and chasing after little Timmy. Like,
fully. And you're like shoulder pressing, you know, 20 kilos, you know, however many times a day. So, it all adds up. But in terms of that RED-S or relative energy deficiency in sport, it was actually originally called the female athlete triad.
I did see that, actually.
I believe. And interestingly enough, most research in sports nutrition is done on males, and then like, oh, well, I guess we'll just do this for smaller males, which isn't the case. Females aren't just smaller versions of males. They've got their own things going on that need to be researched. But the female athlete triad was one of the only things that was studied in females before it was in males, which is kind of cool. So I think we do need probably more research in female athlete space.
Did you see actually they're doing a study on ACL injuries in females?
Oh, no, I didn't.
I think it was the Daily Mail that put it out. And I was like, yes, go the girls.
Cool. And it needs to happen. But relative energy deficiency in sport, again, you don't need a diagnosis to understand some of the signs and symptoms. It's good to speak to someone about that if you do. And that's why I think upskilling kind of coaches, PTs in this space to kind of recognize that, and athletes themselves to go, I know that I'm starting to see signs of this. And I guess the signs are very subtle over the course of weeks of training, but it's things like no performance improvement if you're starting to increase your performance load. It's mood swings, it's losing your period, it's not quite being able to put a finger on where your performance downfalls are happening. Sleep or rest is really getting affected. There's plenty of signs of underfueling. And when you start to actually unpack that and be informed about that, you go, again, it's about narrowing the margin for error. And you go, I know that this is now happening. And as soon as you acknowledge it, you're like, I'm in this space. I need to either speak to someone or I need to start fueling properly for my sessions. And fueling for your session and fueling for your week is the exact same thing. If you fuel for your session, you're going to feel better in that session. If you fuel well enough for your week, you should feel better overall. And again, it's very nuanced, but you're probably going to sleep better. You're probably going to get through your work day a little bit better without kind of energy drops and things like that. So it's very nuanced, but picking up on those and understanding a bit more, being a bit more body conscious about when you're feeling low and, you know, when your mood's a little bit off, you're like, hang on, is my training load over the top or am I underfueling? So they're the two elements of low energy availability is either underfueling or overtraining, and some people are doing both at the same time, which is a very quick road
compounds kind of the effects a little bit.
To stress fractures or pulling your body up short.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, like there needs to be that multi-team discussion, and you know, where do you often see people presenting to in that landscape too? Because obviously, like, you're working with them from a nutrition perspective sometimes, but then, you know, I'm sure they're seeing physios or they've got people who are managing their running program and things like that as well that they need to talk to. And
I would say usually the first people that see it are probably athletes themselves. They understand in the back of their mind that there is something going on, and because they see, you know, Strava and other people are doing this or that, and it's very easy world to get kind of sucked into and go, oh, well, everyone's doing this. And I mean, if you looked at my Strava profile, it's all over the place, and it's like, that's okay for me. It works for me. I'm in the gym sometimes. I'm over here. I'm doing recovery stuff. That works for me, and I try my best not to get injured in that time. But I would say the athlete themselves are probably the first people to recognize it. And then I would say it's run coaches. Run coaches are the next people that probably need to be upskilled in that space to recognize signs of underfueling. Yeah. And then on refer, it's fine to not fully understand everything or not know the answers to stuff. Like that's where you reach out to other health professionals. And the best analogy is, a boxing analogy, to put the right people in your corner to go, do I have the right coach with me? Do I have a nutritionist or dietitian? Do I have a good physio? Once you get those good people in your corner that can speak clearly on a topic and give you clear advice on things, you've got the right people in your corner. And once you've got them, you just hold on to them. Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of, have those discussions between them. And if they're the right health professionals, it will start to link up between what different ones are saying. You're like, actually, that's what the physio said, and it does link up in terms of load management or whatever. So they should be speaking the same language. Yeah.
It's always a nice moment when you're with the client, you like give them a bit of advice and they're like, oh, that's what my physio said, or that's what my doctor said. And you're like, see, we're not lying. Yeah.
And I think as well, from the healthcare practitioner side, we as like a healthcare landscape needed to probably do a better job at talking to each other too, because then it's about having that next layer of communication of, does the physio talk to the run coach? Does the dietitian, nutritionist talk to the physio?
Yeah. And I probably see in 10 years' time we will have a more holistic look of what health looks like in terms of personal metrics from data and things like that from wearables, or being able to cross-reference between a run coach and a physio, because the more those people are talking, the better the individual results end up being, whether it is performance or whether it's lifestyle as well. But I do see that as a good step forward in terms of health professionals working together in the future. Yeah,
it'd be very cool if there was like a platform or an app where we could all connect.
Yeah,
just thinking business that is.
Okay, we're going to cut that and we're going to run that behind the scenes.
There's a lot of legalities around that.
Yeah, copyright it now.
Yeah, done on the air, live, copyright, and no one can.
We'll erase that bit so no one steals our idea.
Nice, mate. Well, mate, I don't want to take any more of your Sunday. Thank you so much for sparing the hour for us to come in and talk a bit of dribble over a coffee. It's
2.0.
been awesome. I always feel like I learn like 1,000,001 different things when we have you on the podcast.
100%. Yeah. And for anyone listening as well, I guess as a bit of a takeaway, obviously we've unpacked a lot around performance nutrition. For anyone in this space that's either really new or just wanting to take that next level, is there like one or two tidbits or one or two sort of main takeaways that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'd say start to learn to understand your body and listen to it when it is sending those kind of red flags up.
Yep.
Because it's all well and good to get really excited and really emotional and engaged in racing, or a lot of friends are doing. That's unreal. I would never speak ill of that. It's just about managing what you're capable of with the rest of your lifestyle as well. So, dip your toe in or dive in the deep end, but it's just what's manageable in your lifestyle. So do that, and then I would say overall is making sure you're fueling enough for what you're asking your body to do. Mm-hmm. So if they're the two tips you take home, then hopefully you're in a good space with any event, whether it's a marathon, whether it's a 5K, the best thing you can do is consistently do that over time, because it's all well and good to do one event and go, oh, I smashed that marathon, or like I did that really well, and then you don't want to be injured for the next however many years and not be able to do one. So I would say that consistency is much better than trying to absolutely smash one race and ruin yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, and if people are interested in learning a little bit more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, Chappo Health and Nutrition website, or just on socials as well.
You're a meme master at the moment. I'm loving it.
I get a bit ruthless at times, but it creates conversation, and that's what social media is for. It's not for that dense, heavy content. It's about creating conversation, and then off the back of that, having conversations like this. So, absolutely. All for these kind of conversations. So if people are keen to reach out, let me know.
Yeah, beautiful. We'll pop it in the show notes.
Very good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to us on. We can't wait to catch you next time.